Hello.
Hello.
Um, so I guess I'll start by sharing that I am a person who is around a lot of death doulas,
Oh,
death midwives, and I have attended grief rituals.
uh-huh.
I have taken part in death cafes and a
Wow.
series out here in Silo called Death and Danishes, where people share stories of home death and dying
Wow.
processes and vigils. And right. So I'm very much exposed to the idea that like death literacy is vital
Wow.
and even so, I found myself um wanting to be sensitive to wherever you're at in this reality, even though I already know that you're a person who has a tremendous capacity for being really open and direct about what you're going through. Like even though I have, all of this death literacy, I was like a little bit tiptoeing as we eased into our conversation today. So I think that's really interesting, and it speaks to my first question, which you do touch on in your series, um, about how other people are interacting with you since you found out that you are dying sooner. I mean, we're all dying, but sooner rather than later. And whether because you're not in like a mainstream social location, right? Like you're in a kind of like outside of Asheville area countercultural social location where
Yeah.
there is a little bit more of a tendency to almost do the opposite of tiptoeing around death. And I imagine there's more of a tendency to like objectify the spiritual specialness of dying. You even wrote something like this when you said, I get it in the meaninglessness, mismatch of modernity. People want to participate in something real, raw, ancient. But for this hermit, this amount of attention is awkward. So I know we're kind of starting in the middle here a little bit, and I'll circle back to more context about what you're sitting in and what we're talking about today. But how have people been interfacing with this part of what you're going through? Are you finding that they don't want to talk about it directly, or that they're in that like spiritual specialness, or nothing like that at all?
Well, it depends on the person. I feel like, the reaction that I really don't like, and I stopped going out for a while because I was getting this, is like the pity face, like, oh, like that. If I'm like out and sort of trying to have fun, that's definitely not what I would want. And I would have not known what to do at all. Like it's inherently awkward in our culture. So I certainly don't blame anybody, but it has been pretty cringe. Um, for me, just I don't feel comfortable with attention. Um, the only attention I want is for people to read my books, but like in person, it's pretty excruciating for me. And then like once I kind of break through with people, like where they're sort of nervous at first, and then I start joking about it, and then they, visibly relax. And like once I've broken through that with somebody, I feel like it's fine from then on, and we're in a better place. And I feel like it's really, interesting for them to drop into my reality of, making jokes about it. And I think I mean, it's healthy for there to be talk about it. And so many people have said, you're so courageous. Like, I could never do this. And it makes me uncomfortable when people say that because I really don't know what else I could have done. I mean, my belly is hugely distended. Doesn't look like a normal fat belly. People would have noticed. I just don't see how I could have just ghosted. It just I can't imagine people doing that. And then just like after the fact, suddenly people are posting about how they're gone. Like that's just unimaginable to me. And I like I said in my essays about it, I looked for other people who were writing about it from a first person perspective, and there's very little. And so I feel like it is a service and it is fascinating. I mean, I'm a writer. I want to express things. It's definitely capturing my imagination. And unlike you, I had no context or experience with death at all. I never thought about it. I'm really interested to learn there's such a thing as a death cafe. That's the first I've heard of it, and I definitely want to go check that out. I've been meaning to go do some support groups and stuff. Um, it's hard to be like I went to this cancer clinic for this healing modality school, and there was like 6 students standing around me, and they're so nice and they're so beautiful, and they're so sensitive, and that too is kind of like you know, it's really refreshing when I'm out in the world interacting with strangers who don't know, and then it's like, okay, I can just be treated like a normal person.
Yeah, I can see how it might become draining to just always interact with people with the awareness of your death reflected back to you, in
Exactly.
their eyes, and
Right.
how you would need the relief of just more normal kinds of social interactions.
Yeah.
Um, I'm going to backtrack a little bit so listeners can fully understand the context here and read an excerpt from the beginning of your series, Confessions of a Dying Writer. Plot twist: advanced cancer at 55. I have a few more months tops, barring a miracle. Just a few weeks ago, I was thinking, damn, who knew it was possible to have tits like these at 55? I was never one for dark humor before, but it's crucial at a time like this. I looked around for blogs by the dying, couldn't find any. Someone needs to do it. Me dying has really captured the attention of my local hippie community. People are so eager to support me. I believe that altruism is instinctive. Most people want to be good people. I get it. In the meaningless mishmash of modernity, people want to participate in something real, raw, ancient. But for this hermit, this amount of attention is awkward. I want to die differently, in a way that touches hearts. I want to hand out $100 bills on the street since I have no heirs. I want to write about death in a way that makes you want to die and want to live. Yeah. I want to circle back to this idea of a miracle because you do mention that a few times throughout your series, which it does read like a journal in a way. And you're right, it's rare to be able to engage with someone processing and expressing this kind of thing in real time. I've only ever read accounts after someone has passed away that their friends have shared. Um, and even that is extremely rare. It's extremely rare. It's almost always like the loved ones of the person who has died reflecting
Exactly.
on their experience.
Right.
Um, and I do find that I have a lot of curiosity about what you're going through, even in certain kind of basic ways. Like, what did you feel like in that moment where you received the information of having advanced cancer?
Yeah. So, there was a perfect storm of situations of like other ailments that I was having that like explained the symptoms. And so, um, it, it took me a while to figure it out, but in the moment in time when I was about to go to a birthday party on April 10th, and then all of a sudden I knew deep in my bones that something was terribly wrong. And I knew, like, I'm probably gonna die. Like, but I went to the ER and they did a scan, and it was 3 days before the doctors would actually tell me anything. Like, for the first 24 hours, I thought, okay, there's a mass in my digestive tract and they're gonna take it out, and hopefully that could happen like tomorrow, so I don't even have to go home and it can just happen. And then my belly is going to go down because there's just a block in there. There's like a mass, and it's just something that can be like removed. And I'm gonna go home and, you know, be dancing this weekend. So for the first 24 hours that I was in the hospital, so they checked me in after the scan, they checked me in. And then people brought me like some clothes and stuff and my chargers and things. But 24 hours later, after I got the scan results, I sent them to my mother's husband, who's a retired colorectal cancer surgeon. And I mean, I'll never forget, for however long I live, where I was standing looking out the window of Mission Hospital at the amazing view, while I was on the phone with him. And he said, um, nope, it's not a block. It's really widespread. And, I think that you should come down to Florida and your mom and I will take care of you. It's hospice time. I was like, what, are we talking a year? He said, no, ma'am, months. And um, some part of me just knew, like, I feel like this has always been my destiny, and I can trace back to all of the events that led to this, and feel like I really feel divinely guided that whatever is meant to happen is going to happen, um, and that it will be the right thing for my soul path. So having that spiritual, you know, guidance really helps. So there wasn't this like, I mean, I can't really, I don't know what other people experience in that moment. Like, I did spend the rest of the day and the night crying. And I asked the nurse was really amazing. Like somehow we created this bond. And I said, what do most people, experience in that moment when they're first told? And I was really, she said something about the 5 stages of grief. And I was like, that's generic. No, I want like, what has your experience been? And I think most people in the West have this attitude of like, the longer you live, the better. Like that's all that matters is just prolonging your life, even if you're on life support. And I definitely don't feel that way. I mean, I was walking around the hospital and seeing, really old people who were just struggling to breathe, like could barely even watch TV, and I'm like, I don't want that. Um, but there's all these things I do want. I mean, I want to write two more books that are the most important things that I kind of am living for and like was born for. And if I had kids, this would be a completely different equation entirely. It's hard enough to conceive of leaving my cat. He's only 5, and I raised him, and he loves me so much. So yeah, so there's a lot of grief, and there's also a lot of relief of like I don't have to worry about a lot of things that I, was preparing for apocalyptic situations. Um, growing old alone. So there's a lot of relief, and then there was a phase of utter like spiritual um transcendence where I was just white light was pouring in my head and I'm meditating and I was going out and people were just like, whoa, you're glowing. Like what, and that's just kind of this. I mean, I've done enough spiritual work and enough psychedelics to be able to reach that state and be sort of excited about the next adventure. So, um, and then kind of like yeah, there's these things that I'm living for and I'm gonna do it. But so at first it was an absolute no on chemo, like I'll do anything, but then I guess when it kind of sets in, it's like, all right, I guess I'm doing that too.
Mhm. How do you spend your time? That's the other kind of like surface level point of curiosity that comes up for me. Like, how do you feel each morning when you wake up and each night as you go to sleep. Um, and also like I guess we can start there, but I'm also really curious about your relationship to time
Hmm.
and how that your relationship to the future has changed and to the past has changed. Um, you write, things I won't be doing anymore, making small talk, returning Amazon purchases, pretending, vacuuming the back of my car. Should I bother with sunscreen? Nah. Should I renew my driver's license that it expires in August? How many chiropractic adjustments should I buy with my next package? I'm glad I didn't bother getting braces a few years ago. Damn, I just replaced all my tires. Doesn't matter. I guess all my subscriptions will end once my credit card gets canceled. Will someone need to pay my 2026 taxes? I guess my digital avatar will endure forever as a ghost in the machine. Right before I got the news, I bought new pants for the first time since before COVID. Like all the pants I have bought during this incarnation, they are too long. Should I bother hemming them? The fruit trees I planted a decade ago have laboriously nurtured are finally bearing fruit. I hope I make it at least until mulberry season. Should I plant a flower garden in the bare patch in front of the house where I had to trench last fall? Sure, best thing we can do is plant beauty that will bloom beyond our time. It's been interesting for me to ponder what actions I'm taking are for the present, which ones are for my own future, and which ones are for a time beyond my own.
Yeah, time is really weird. I mean, it's been 5 weeks now, and it seems like a really long time. And, every day lasts so long. And occasionally there are moments where I forget for like maybe 5 or 10 minutes at a time. Usually, if I'm like out in town and hanging out with somebody and we're talking about normal things. So, and then it's surprising, but it's amazing how quickly you get used to something like this. Like there are no moments when I first wake up where I don't know. And but it's actually the busiest I've ever been. Because in addition, I mean, I have to do the things I normally do, in terms of taking care of my body and my house and my car and my land. But I'm also doing all of these alternative therapies, and it's driving me fucking insane. And um, and sometimes it just feels really futile. Um, and then, I mean, right, and then I was shooting a short film that's being made about my life, and that was a big project. And there's still, more to go with that. And then I'm getting my affairs in order is the main thing. And my affairs are epic. I have 35 acres and like 5 dwellings that I built, and like, you know, cat and intellectual property of my books, and little piece of land in Florida. So a lot of things to deal with, and obviously it's intense and triggering to do so. And disassociation is a talent of mine. I mean, I think it's obviously evolutionary adapt adaptational. No,
Yeah,
but
adaptation. Mm-hmm.
an yes. Um, but it's also the thing that led to the situation I'm in. Um, you know, but I look at pictures now from last winter. My belly was already hard, and I should have known. And if I didn't have such a deep distrust of the medical system, I would have gone to a physical and they would have said, "What's wrong with your belly?" And I would have said, "I thought this is what happens in menopause." So I think of COVID, I mean, there's so many things that happened where things could have been different. And so you know, I, there's no point in my brain kind of winding backwards and looking at those things and saying, if only COVID hadn't happened, still would have gone and trusted the medical system, gotten checkups. Someone would have noticed. Um, and then like for the first couple weeks, there was all of this like life review stuff of um um just seeing these patterns in my life and seeing the most significant things and seeing the most significant people just kind of pop out on my screen. And then, you know, lots of visits and phone calls. You know, my ex that I built this house with, um, hadn't talked to him in 10 years. We talked for hours and it's kind of like, okay, goodbye, goodbye. You know, it really touched my heart to have that closure and that well-wishing and gratitude. And so those things are just absolutely precious. And but that seems to not really be happening now. Now I'm just like really pragmatically focused on getting the things done that I want to get done. And you know, hoping to live. It would be sort of awkward, you know, after all this. But but it could happen.
Yeah, I guess that's where we'll circle back to the miracle you touch on there. You mentioned it a couple different times in sort of small and assuming ways throughout the series. That still leapt out to me. Like in one passage, you write, "I'm planning on a miracle," and then in another, it's "unless there's a miracle." So where
Mm.
are you at with this idea of like miracles and possibility and reality versus hopefulness, or like where are you at with all of that, because I imagine that's like a psychological labyrinth.
Yeah, it constantly fluctuates. I mean, as do my moods normally. And so, um, like after the chemo, my belly went down a little bit and I was really hopeful. And then, um, but it's hard to tell if it's coming back. I mean, I'm measuring it, but I'm not sure if I'm like sucking it in or whatever. It's not gone, and I can't live like this for very long. It's really uncomfortable. And so I had had this hope that like one chemo would do it and my belly would go down and my cancer markers would go down and the doctors would be amazed. So I just had a blood test yesterday and I'm waiting to see what my markers are now. And the thought was if they're low enough, maybe I don't have to do another chemo because it was just unimaginably excruciating for like 2 days. Um, so I mean, the fact that my belly is still there makes me think I'm gonna have to do it again, in 2 weeks. But yeah, it's constantly fluctuating. And yesterday I had a day where I kind of, I kind of had this moment of, I just want to die now and get it over with and not have to go through all this. Um, And like the actual dying part, I mean, if it's not too painful, like if there's a way that I could get euthanasia or just OD or something, that part isn't bad. And now I'm kind of obsessed with like the Gnostic texts about what happens after you die and how to navigate that reality. And that's kind of my current obsession. Um, but yeah, we'll see what these markers are. And I guess my appetite is normal again, which at the time of the diagnosis, I mean, it happened so fast, like within 3 days to where my belly got huge and stayed that way. And I was in intense pain. Like it happened really fast. And at that point, I had no appetite. So it seems like a really good sign that I want food now and like can eat lots of food. So, like I said, I'm in surrender.
Yeah, I haven't had near death experiences, but I've had a lot of close to death experiences, and a child who was, in the NICU and had
Oh,
complications with his health when he was little. And I
oh.
went through a similar thing where it was like suddenly the function of avoidance
Mm,
and the function of
mm,
dissociation was much clearer,
mhm,
and I could appreciate the function of it. Like I can't handle it in
mm.
this moment, so now I'm going to avoid.
Right,
I'm going to avoid reality, and the reality that we're ultimately always avoiding is that
right.
we are mortal and we will
Right.
all die, and we cannot predict how we or our loved ones will die, and it can happen quite suddenly. And then that eventually always loops back into surrender, which is how I've come to define prayerfulness. I
Mm.
don't think that prayerfulness is defined. I know we often approach prayer as like asking divinity for what we want, or
Hmm.
begging divinity to spare us from an outcome we fear or do not want. And I think that's very human, and there's a, prayerfulness in that sense can be supportive in its own way, but really what it comes down to is surrender, and letting ourselves be shaped by whatever the reality it actually is and actually will be, no matter how horrible. And yeah, so how is like your relationship with your experience of divinity? You mentioned earlier, like, you've lived a life where you've had a sense of, like, purpose, and have followed callings and have fulfilled desires. And you go into this in a deeper way too in this series when you mention um this this idea of regret, that, as we approach death, as we have a more intimate relationship with death, of course, we we are told to take inventory of our regrets. And in your case, you lived a really full life. Let me see if I can find find the quote down here. I have no regrets. I probably erred on the side of taking too many risks. I've been to about 65 countries. There's nothing left on my bucket list. I've tried everything twice. After 15 years of hand weeding all the plants I didn't like, it's paradise. You're referring to your home and your property here. It was only in the past few years that I've put the finishing touches on the house. Every single thing is perfect. Everything has its place. So I do regret that I didn't finish sooner. I just talked to my brother for the first time in 2 years after he told me to leave the family reunion for my political views. When I said my only regret was that I didn't finish my floor sooner, he laughed his ass off. Yeah, so yeah, tell me a little bit about this like sense of purpose, or our relationship with divinity, and sort of like our life path, and this experience so many people have of what our spiritual business is and unfinished business, and
Hmm.
how we might feel compelled to finish whatever unfinished business there is, if there is any. um yeah.
I repainted a room a few months ago, and they're like, I missed these two spots, like where the trim was, because I forgot how far the trim was, and it seems like that's like this somehow a metaphor for like that tiny little corner that's unfinished. Um, but like as someone with ADHD, it's really like unfinished projects are really painful and kind of weigh on the soul, you know. But now I don't even, I feel like I've been chasing pleasure my whole life, but in a spiritual sort of way, with the idea of pleasure in taking pleasure in this earth as being a divine calling by honoring, goddess creation. And so I've done a good job with that. And now I just don't even, I mean, the pleasure that remains is just being in nature on my land. And when I drop into a trance state, I feel in communion with everything, that everything is then attuning to me, the birds and the winds and the chi and the spirits and deities. And I'm not really sure. I guess I didn't have a spiritual path since my family were really atheists. I guess they tried to send me to church and all the things, but it didn't take until I tried psychedelics when I was 15. And that just gave me a deep sense of of faith, and I actually don't like that word because it's weird, but it's used to like imply that that you should believe something that there's no evidence for, whereas I'm a spiritual scientist. I mean, that's one of the other two books that I want to write is about spiritual science, the science of magic. Is I've learned I've had faith because I have experimented with reality, and reality has shown itself to be deeply mysterious. And so I just, I don't have any doubts that there's something really epic going on here and that after death it's going to be interesting. Um, so I guess that's, I mean, there are times when I just have left, been in kind of nirvana states and experienced that oneness with everything. And so it's more accessible to me now than ever before.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Um, you wrote that my own physical beauty had a bloom this spring along with the dogwoods. I was
Mhm.
having a good hair season and I had a feeling it was the last one. I think my higher self knew. I believe our higher selves actually know everything that is going on, but keep it secret from the lower selves the way we hide ice cream from toddlers. I'm very aware of these various selves in my mind, which is why I refer to myself with we, us pronouns. It was a good last bloom. Usually, thankfully, our conscious mind is unaware that something is the last. Last time we had a family reunion, my mom morosely predicted it would be the last. And I knew the last time I had sex that it was the last. Yeah. Yeah. So, is there enhancement of pleasure in that sense? Like
Mhm. Mhm.
every experience that is your last becomes sweeter?
Definitely. I mean, my overall like median mood is the same as before, but the highs are higher and the grief is deeper. But yeah, the pleasures, I mean, even just like eating something, now that my appetite is kind of normal, there's enormous amount of pleasure in that. Although, well, I'm giving myself every 10 days to eat what I want, but for the most part, I'm just having juice and kitchery, which is not very exciting. But yeah, there are some distinct pleasures like that, and in touch, But um, and gosh, I don't know. I feel self-conscious about accepting touch, like sensual touch, from someone I'm attracted to. I feel like I don't have anything to give back, but then I have had reflected to me that being in my presence is has been a gift to people just because I am dropped into this space of authenticity. And there are also moments where I'm like in a rage and I don't know how to like what I don't really know how to move that. And it's making me really aware. I'm my mind is blown at how much people pleasing I'm doing even now. Even at 55 as a like hardcore feminist who's deconstructed my patriarchal programming, like um how much I'm enduring like trying to manage people's experience of this. Um and that feels crazy. Um but I don't yeah, I'm confused about the moral what our moral imperatives are in terms of, how much to manage that mood when I'm in that mood. When something brings it on. I mean, I guess like now I mean, something so trivial that I'm still so vain. It's my hair. It's really like, I mean, look at it. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just downloaded one of those face apps where you can try on different hair, and it's definitely the best hair for me. Like there's nothing else, So in terms of getting a wig, um, it would, maybe I could just shave my own hair and have them make a wig of it because it's really the perfect
Yeah.
hair.
Yeah, I love that idea. Yeah, you touch on death and sex and pleasure, particularly in the latest installment of this series. And you talk too about the HBO, I think it's HBO show Dying for Sex, which I just watched recently, actually.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Um, and and how you're grateful that you're experiencing this kind of like later on in the middle age period where you've already kind of been through the cougar puberty, or I can't remember the exact phrase, it was something like that. Adolescence, the sort of like extra horny teenage boy that we all encounter as there are hormonal shifts later in life. And yeah, how that's all still, on the one hand, like you've lived a lot of life, and on the other hand, that's still all of these like basic human things are still humaning.
Mhm.
And um you very quickly realized, just like the character in that television show, that you'd much rather die with a close female friend than with a male partner. And you're like fully integrating different channels of your sexuality and eroticism, including attraction to women and including being able to receive erotic fulfillment through ecstatic experiences of dancing with beautiful men. um you know, part of you is still kind of holding out for maybe a synchronistic manifestation of your ideal threesome, and part of you is like, no, it's I'm good with what I've already experienced in this life, and with the dancing and the yeah, moments of erotic ecstasy that don't necessarily have to come in this package of, I don't know, whatever the cultural ideal is. Life partnership, I guess, would be the cultural ideal. So do you have any thoughts about sex and death and the relationship between the two, or like how sexuality and eroticism cannot be separated from mortality? Because I think about this a lot, and it is a real
Hmm.
struggle for me to explain to people what I'm sensing into there. The best I can do is like complain about the fact that no one seems to date from a place of understanding their mortality.
Oh my God. Yes. Yes. I mean, like what some of the things they both have in common is that they're radically improved by being in the moment. I mean, like I have to deal with my affairs, so that's in a way not taking me out of the moment, but I'm just amazed at how able I am to kind of just sit and look out the window and be with what is. And I think the biggest mistake that has come about through patriarchy is yoking Eros to this whole paradigm of futuring and obligation and obligatory sex and all that stuff. And yeah, I think so. Yeah, I've imagined what it could be to have a sexual experience now, and there is, I think, somebody who I could see seems interested in joining me, and I reached out before chemo, and then after chemo, I was in excruciating agony, and I am self-conscious about my body, and I think he could hold space for that. Um, so I might try it, and yeah, and then there's this like, oh gosh, it would just be safer not to. It could be cringe. Can I even respond? Can I be enough in the moment to yeah, what would it would be safer not to, but I um probably will experiment with it. But yeah, and at the same time it also feels pointless. I mean, I had kind of in that article I wrote about the last time I had sex a few months ago and I was reflecting upon it then. There is a sense in which I do feel done with kind of patriarchal eros, and it's been somewhat disappointing. I mean, I've done a lot of work around it with my tantra, um, deep deep studies into tantra school and all of that, and so I have had moments of spiritual sexuality, but at this point, that's really all that's left because there is no future. There is no, hopefully, people pleasing around it. And yeah, I like it would just be, it would need to come from a place of just radical authenticity in every moment.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and even if we don't know that we're dying,
Mm,
sex, at least, certain kinds of sex as like a portal for the creation of life, but then also a portal to pleasure that leads to self-annihilation,
mm,
ego death,
mm,
merging, like the
mm,
dissolution of individual
right.
identity,
Mhm.
um, love, the kind of love where like our most vulnerable body parts and
Mm,
insecurities are embraced by another person, are worshipped
mm,
and adored. And I really feel like this is, sex can be all sorts of things, but this
mhm,
particular thing, this like
mhm,
way of helping us remember
mm,
death is one of the most important roles that sex has in our relationships. And yeah, because of my own chronic health struggles and chronic
mm,
pain, I've
mm,
often had the experience of feeling uncertain if I will ever dance again
mm.
without my joints hurting and my body like, radiating heat from inflammation. And if I will ever know what it feels like to not be in constant physical pain. Or I think about my sick friend who had a moment of knowing it was the last time she was physically able to ride a bike down a gravel road with her daughter.
Oh,
um and and you specifically say, this is not a trite lecture about carpe the diem, living for today, carpe diem, live for today, etc., because that's impossible. And with our whole lives ahead of us, we can't remember to cherish the present moment. It just doesn't work that way. The veil of forgetting is built in. And you're totally right. Yeah, it's like a fruitless task to always try to live in a way where we know death and we know that each experience could be our last, no matter how seemingly mundane. And of course, part of me doesn't want to forget and
mhm,
has become a bit of a glutton for like anything, any kind of
mm,
human experience that
mm,
reminds me
mm,
of that. Um, and I don't know, I just really respect the kind of equanimity and peacefulness and maturity of taking the pressure off, all the spiritual pressure off to try to hold on to
mm,
that, this awareness of death and the remembering, and instead to just be like, yes, the veil of forgetting is built in, almost like it just lends a lot of permission to me to like embrace the full spectrum
mm,
of forgetting and remembering and of taking life
mm,
for granted and then cherishing
mm,
life again.
mm,
And I also know from, again, not close to near death experiences, but close to death experiences, that like if my child were to die, for example,
mm,
I actually probably wouldn't just like regret all of the times I was a less than wonderful mom. I would
mm,
cherish every single experience I had with that child, including
mhm,
our arguments, including the times
mhm.
that I was a terrible mom. Um, so yeah, have you experienced some of that too, where it's like every part of life is just kind of okay, looking back.
Yeah, definitely. There's like a retroactive application of okayness. Um, and yeah, and I really feel for you around the chronic pain. I mean, I've had a lot of chronic conditions, and like right now there's almost this, I guess, the opposite of survivor guilt, in the sense of I feel so guilty for having this level of love and reflection and attention. And then there are people who, are living in daily agony, but they don't have, they're not dying. They just have a chronic condition and they're not getting any support. So there's an irony in the things that we consider to be worth supporting. I mean, if I live for another 2 years, could we move on to a different topic, Um, yeah, like how can I to kind of move some of the support over to people who have to live with suffering? Yeah.
It's funny, survivor's guilt and the like, and like this idea that we can trade off suffering or bargain
Mhm.
with suffering in some way. It's just so sweet, right? Like it's, just part of our empathy for one another
Mm.
and selflessness and um yeah. Um let's see. I have this passage over here about how people have asked you for words of wisdom, um, and then you come up empty. You feel like you've got nothing, and sometimes you've had the thought that you would have had more answers by the end of your life, but instead it just gets weirder and more mysterious than ever. Um, but then you go on to say, what I can tell you is if you have the money, buy wild lands, build a small house, and conserve the wilds, and live a life on your own terms. Create beauty, be kind. Yeah. And hearing you mention your book several times too, and how like that was 100% the correct way to spend large parts of your life and like the correct use of your energy, and like it's like something that you feel really great about outliving you, and um really shored me up as a writer, because I do sometimes, in that
Mm.
forgetting and remembering cycle, I do sometimes remember that that is actually the best thing I could hope to do with my life.
Mm.
Something like write a book, um create beauty, be kind, and if you have the money, buy wild lands and conserve them. um yeah, what do you think defines like wisdom? Because I suspect that it's less about like what is profound, and it's much more about the ability to just sort of know that this is a life, it's a whole human life, and any kind of impulse that is driven by passion, fascination, that feeling that I can't not do this.
Mm.
Like that's really ultimately all that it takes to feel at least somewhat fulfilled by our life. Would you say?
Yeah, and some people they don't have this drive to have a purpose and to have some fulfillment. I mean, my mom never did, and she recently said, I never understood why you felt the need to have a purpose. Like, yeah, I mean, maybe that's like an ADHD thing or but yeah, for me, like following the fascination. You said that well, and I like your forgetting, remembering cycle. Um, yeah, following the fascination and like, people are talking about my legacy, and that's just not really something that I relate to because I think, I'm nothing. I'm just a fleeting incarnation, but like information, like having written books and putting that information into the Akashic records, like that's forever, So I'm just really grateful that I was guided to do that.
Do you have any closing thoughts for us as we come to the end of our hour here?
Um, I don't know. I think that create beauty and be kind is, I mean, I have been contemplating what the purpose is of being kind. Maybe there's no purpose to any of this. Maybe it is totally random. I think it's not, but there's no reward. If there is a life review, I kind of think that that's all part of the scam, but I think I'll have done pretty well if it matters. So I guess everyone has to find their own meaning. And, for a lot of people, that's their kids, and that's an absolutely beautiful meaning. And I think that's why a lot of people do it, is that it's just a built-in meaning and purpose. And if your meaning is just to enjoy life and, um, try not to fuck things up too much, then great. That too.
Thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you so much, Alyssa.